my entire experience in the Marine Corps was a lot of chaos, a lot of like not knowing what is going on, almost knowing too much about some stuff, and then not enough about other stuff.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by Rob. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, their stories go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath we all took. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast this week.
Yeah, not a problem.
And so the first question I always ask people is, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
So I think a big part of it was I was a kid when 9/11 happened. And the way that it was portrayed to all of us was we were attacked and we had to do something about it. Of course, at the time I was young, couldn't do anything then. And then as I got older, I had bosses that were Marines. I had friends of the family that were Marines. There were Marines in my life that influenced me, I think, in a good direction. And the one primarily would have been I had two, I guess I would say. One, my boss for 4 years through high school. And then another one, she was like our youth group leader when I was at church when I was little. And she joined the Marine Corps. And it was like, well, anything she can do, I can do better than her. So I better do it. and my boss, he was an old school Vietnam vet that I looked up to and was like, man, when I get older, I want to be, kind of like him. And then when I was about 16, me and my dad had a huge falling out, and I made it like a personal, I don't know, goal, I guess, that I'm gonna have to out accomplish him. I'm gonna have to do so much better. I'm gonna be such a better version of him. Um, and so it was like, what better way than to join the Marine Corps? And at our school, they come in, did a little ASVAB testing, and every branch called me except the Marine Corps. And I was like, well, then I guess I'm just not. They don't want me. I'm not going to the Marine Corps. And I was getting ready to go to the Army recruiting office to discuss a package. And the Marine recruiter called me and was like, hey, man, we just like to talk to you. And I think like a week or two later, I was signing paperwork, waited to graduate, and then off I went to boot camp.
That's wild. And where are you from originally?
Originally from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, you may be the first guest out of like the 30 plus something episodes that it was a female Marine as one of the Marine like influencers in your
Yeah.
life. Like that's wild.
I want to say she was 10 years older than me. And like we had a good relationship. Like we went and skied and we did a bunch of stuff together. Even after I like stopped going to church, her and I still had like a pretty good relationship. And her dad was a Marine as well. And so I looked up to him too, because he was again the old Vietnam guys.
Yeah.
And then once she did it, it was like, man, me and her have been competing our whole
Whole
lives.
lives.
Like, if you're doing it, I have to do it. And so, yeah, it was.
I think that's a really cool origin story. Now, did you know, like you knew you wanted to like be a Marine, but did you know what you wanted to do in the Marine Corps?
So I think when I was younger, I didn't know I wanted to be a Marine. I think I just wanted to be in the military.
Okay.
Um, and like I guess what most young guys like, and it sounds so cliche, but like I want to go kill bad guys, right? Like I want to take care of the problem. And then as I got older, and it definitely got to like I want to be a Marine, you know, the Marine Corps has the highest standard and all of that good jazz. And then the guys around me, especially the Vietnam guys, it was like, yeah, I want to be in the Marine Corps. I want to be a Marine. And it still was like, I want to be a grunt. I want to be slinging lead down range. Um, and they tried talking me in other careers. Um, but I don't know. There was something about like that's what you do when you're a little kid. Like where I grew up, we didn't have, TV and I don't know what was it back then, like cable or
Yeah,
satellite or whatever. Like
yeah.
we didn't have, so we were outside playing make believe, and it was always like war and army and that was even before 9/11. It was like in us, and so yeah, I think that was just what I wanted to do, and so even when I got to boot camp, there was an opportunity to go in different directions and do some really cool stuff that I was selected for. And it was like, no, man, I just want to pull a trigger. That's it, you know?
How was boot camp? Because I feel like so many of us have, well, one, we love sharing boot camp stories, but like at the end of the day too, I feel like so many of us like kind of have like very different experiences, or maybe perception is better because you pretty much were straight out of high school. So how was boot camp?
um, it was, I don't know. It's like looking back, it's way more enjoyable and was like, man, I would probably have done 4 years of boot camp than some of the things I went through in the fleet. Uh, I would say it started out kind of rough for me personally, because there was one other kid from where I came from, and my recruiter was friends with our series gun and basically told the series gun, like, hey, one of the guys I'm sending down is squared away, and the other one is not. And so it basically got taken out on both of us that were not squared away. And then I immediately dropped in, like as soon as you pick up with like the drill instructors, I became a squad leader. And so every time anybody got in trouble, I was part of that. And we weren't eating. Like we had two drill instructors that was the way they punished us, was just like, you have 10 seconds to eat chow. I don't care if it's hot. Like you just won't eat. And so I went from working out all the time to prepare for boot camp. Like that was my full time. And then now all of a sudden I'm not eating. We didn't work out near as much as I thought we were going to.
Right?
Like,
I I had similar where like I was like very, very fit going in. And
yeah.
so it was, and I thought that this was just more of a female experience because I was a lot more fit than like the females that were in my pool anyway. And it was just like we weren't working out. Like I went in doing like 6 or 7 pull-ups and left not being able to do a single one because
It's funny
it
you
was
say that.
different. It was different.
I went to boot camp, I think doing 18 or 19. And I was like, man, by the time I get out of boot camp, I'll be running a 300 PFT. This is going to be awesome. And then I think on my PFT, I only did like 15 or 16. I was like, what is happening? But they like have to bring all the turd burglars along. And so it screws the guys who are at the top, you know? And so, yeah, my physical performance went down. I had broke both my wrists in high school, and all of the push-ups on the quarter deck just rocked my wrists by like, week 3. And then you go to the range, and it was just like a constant. We did the island campaign hopping. We were in sand pits all the time. Like, and because I was a squad leader, it was just like, I'm going to single this guy out all the time. And so there for the first couple weeks, it was hard too, um, mentally, because my family was like on a delay of getting letters sent. And that's like the only glimpse of like anything good. So like
Yeah.
everybody was getting mail, and I was like,
And you
oh, dude,
weren't.
I hate my family. I am over it. Like, I don't. So I wrote like a real nasty letter home and was just like, if you don't start sending me letters, like I'm done with you. And so we got letters then. And I think after you get through that weird, awkward like first 2 weeks, um, I met some dudes, secretly, because you can't ever talk to anybody. And we became friends. And then it became, I don't know, way more enjoyable. But I had some very tough, and I know everybody has like tough drill instructors, but we definitely had the ones that were, two at least, that were pushing the envelope of like, how far can I push these kids before they snitch? that I'm like putting hands on them. And so there were a couple times where like me personally getting like sent between the racks and smashed, or just like, man, like I can't even go to the bathroom without getting beat up. Like this is, but at the end of the day, it's like there's a reason why the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps. And so am I that upset about it? No, not really. Um, but at the time, yeah, there were days I would say after first phase, I was definitely in a way better headspace. But first phase, I was like, man, what have I got myself into? Like this was, but then
This
like, and,
was
and we'll go back to the female that kind of, it was like, man, she got through this. All right, well, like
I
another
guess
day,
I
one foot
will.
through the other. Yeah, if she did it, there's no way I'll be able to go home and ever face
Look
her.
at her.
I'll never hear the end of it. So suck it up, Buttercup. Like,
Oh, that's
gotta
so
go.
good. And how long were you in the Marine Corps?
4 years.
4 years. And so
Yep.
what was your when you got through boot camp and you got through your basic training and like your schoolhouse and all of that, what was your first duty station and kind of like your thought of the Marine Corps then at that point, once you were kind of in it, but not yet in it?
So my experience was definitely different than most. We got out of boot camp and I immediately went to infantry school, SOI at Camp Geiger. And then from there they trucked us straight to Camp Lejeune. Um, and so they dropped us. And I think almost our entire infantry class went to 2 units. I think everybody went to either 2-9 or 3-2. And so um, I get to 2-9, but it was like mid-December or end of December. All of our senior guys had already left for Christmas leave block. And so we get to the fleet. We like, there's nobody there. We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea where to put our stuff. There's no, like, it was so chaotic. And I think there was maybe like our company commander and then like a corporal or two. And they basically just threw our stuff in a room and was like, hey, fill this paper out and then go home. We're like, how do we get home? We don't know where we are, nothing. And so I hit the fleet, and within 3, 4 hours later, I was at the bus station taking a bus from Jacksonville, North Carolina, all the way to Pennsylvania. It was like an 18-hour bus ride. It was awful. I was calling friends that were still in high school, like, dude, come meet me at this bus station and pick me up because I don't want to ride this bus anymore. It's awful. And it was Christmas time. It was snowy, so there was delays. When we came back from Christmas, I knew a family friend, like my mom's friends, their older son had joined the Marine Corps and was killed in Iraq. And at his funeral, I think that was when I saw Dress Blues and were like, man, these dudes are squared away. And I think that helped me want to choose the Marine Corps. But his younger brother was in an ARDA unit that was also at Lejeune. And so he gave me a ride back to North Carolina, which was phenomenal, except for I didn't know where I lived. He's like, oh, where do I drop you off at? I'm like, I don't know, dude. It was a brick building. And he's like, well, everything's brick here. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know, French Creek. And at that time, French Creek was more than just two buildings. I didn't know that. And so we drove around and I called guys until like, otherwise I don't know what I would have done. I don't know how I would
Yeah.
have ever found my unit or anything. We finally get back. I don't know where to sleep. I don't like, we have nothing. And then they introduced us to our squad leaders and team leaders who were these like salty Lance corporals and basically all Lance corporals and like one or two sergeants. And it was just like the games began at that point. Like, oh, hey, you're our new boots. Awesome. Start cleaning the bathrooms, start mopping the floors. We lived with a guy in a different platoon. It was super temporary, but it was like, what is going on? Where are we? Like, there was no training going on. It was wake up, show up, say you're here, and then disappear until we did it again in the evening. We had nothing going on unless we did, extra training out in the tree line. But that was usually because something bad
And
happened.
how
So
weird is it looking back and like knowing what you know about the Marine Corps for that to have been like your experience? Because like hearing that, like that's wild to me because I never once like wasn't told like what to do. You know what I mean? Like what to do after the schoolhouse. It was literally like, yeah, here's your room, here's your, and you report back to work. How is it like looking back on it?
It's still chaotic. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how we lived where we lived. Like, we were in where we were at, they were condemned barracks,
I
but
was
they
about to ask.
reopened. They were 4-man rooms with community showers. We were living with a corporal from another platoon, so there was a lot of tension there. And we were just like quiet all the time. Um, but as an infantry unit, we didn't really do anything during the work week. I say that, and there's going to be some staff sergeant that listens to this and like, oh, good, I got to find stuff for them to do. But we didn't do anything unless we were in the field, like unless we were prepping. Now there were times we were doing gear checks or like little stuff, but Monday through Friday typically was like, hey, hide. Don't let anybody from company find you or see you. Stay out of trouble. Don't do anything wrong. Be where you need to be when you need to be there. But it was super chaotic. And then a few months later, we moved to new barracks. And then that got a little bit more okay, this is my room, this is my bunk, this is my stuff. Um, and that was a little bit better. But yeah, it was, I don't know. My entire experience in the Marine Corps was a lot of chaos, a lot of like not knowing what is going on, almost knowing too much about some stuff, and then not enough about other stuff. It was, I mean, my first deployment, we landed at Dwyer and we were getting ready to load onto 53s and fly into Marja. And on the flight line, our lieutenant and staff sergeant decided it was a good idea to like scramble up our squads and fire teams, all of them. Like, I think MC and Poncho were the only guys that I was in a squad with that came with me to my new squad. And then we weren't even in the same fire teams. Like, it was wild. We did an entire workup in the same fire team with the same squad leader. We knew each other. We knew how we operated. And as we're loading on the 53s to fly into our battle space, our command was like, nah, let's mix it up.
And how did that impact you guys, not just like doing the job, but like emotionally too?
Oh, morale was
Because
terrible. Like,
yeah, that just seems
I had never the squad. I went from first squad to second squad, and I had never really even talked to the second squad leader. Like, as a lance corporal, you're not talking to a sergeant in another squad. Like, you have your sergeant and that's it. And so I never really talked to second squad leader. Now he's my squad leader as I'm getting ready to go on a bird and land in RAO. Like, what? Are you kidding me? And so it really messed. And like, we complained about it. But there's only so much you can only complain about it for so long. And then it's time to just like, okay, this sucks. Let's go. And yeah, it definitely messed with us. I mean, don't get me wrong. Once you live with the same 9 guys for 7 months, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. But we had already lived with our squads between California, between every other training evolution we did. We knew, hey, this is how we operate. This is how we do things. This is good to go. I trust you. You trust me. I'm a great point man. You're a great this, like whatever. And then all of a sudden it was like get dropped into a new squad. Who really knows? Yeah, it was
and
difficult.
and I think too, like when you think of like I had a high school volleyball coach who always said like practice doesn't make perfect, it makes habit. And to
Mm,
do something like that where you've practiced and you've done these things and you've created these habits, um, and I don't know what they were thinking. I can't answer that, but
they
like
weren't. They weren't thinking. I
right.
had
And so if you're the ones who are you're the ones who have to deal with the ramifications of it and then your voice isn't being heard, like that has a lot of impacts, like even just beyond like
yeah.
tactfully.
So I have after I got out of the Marine Corps and got into the Marine Corps League and stuff, I've met a ton of Marines from my generation, before me, after me. In fact, like our Muay Thai coach was recon Marine. Like, I just assumed that my experience in the Marine Corps was similar. to everybody else's. And when I talk about my chain of command, and I'm talking not just one or two guys, staff sergeant, lieutenant, company first sergeant, company commander, people are like, how did any of you ever make it home with that like setup? That was terrible. And it's like, honestly, most of the time, our highest rank at our patrol base was a corporal, E4. I mean, like, and I think that was why we were able, because E4 and below, it's a bunch of gangsters. And so, hey, we're operating as a bunch of gangsters. We have no choice but to do what we need to do. There is no politics. There is no, we have to do this, we have to do that. It is, what do we need to do? And anytime hire was involved, bad stuff happened. And that was when we took casualties. That was when anything bad ever happened was due to our chain of command. And
And
I
I
thought all chain of commands were that way until I finally got a good one and was like, wow, like this is awesome. The Marine Corps can be really great. But yeah, that it took too long for that to happen.
and not to go on a tangent, but I think that this is really important to say. This is a great example of when we talk about command climate of a certain command, and how it literally can cause so many issues, and
Yeah.
how holding other people accountable or the rest of the Marine Corps accountable is great. But when a command can operate and function and essentially run how they want to run, that's where like there's an issue. And this is a perfect example. And you even said like it, like when they got involved, casualties happened. Like
Oh
how
yeah.
wild is that to I think, and like to just like say it that bluntly. I mean, that was the reality of what you experienced.
We couldn't trust our command. Like that's
Holy
how
shit.
our OP, we were, and everybody always talks about like, oh, we're the bastard children, and like we were the ones left out there. Where we were at, like I said, most of the time our highest rank was a corporal. We had, I think, 8 or 9 riflemen and 2 mortarmen and a corpsman at our position and 5 Afghanis. And for the most part, we were self-sustaining. We took care of ourselves. The only thing we needed from hire was water and chow. That was it. But we couldn't trust them to provide support by fire. We couldn't trust. They micromanaged our radio. Like we were getting tips from locals. We had built a great relationship with locals. They were giving us intel about, hey, these compounds have IEDs in them, around them. The Taliban are using them. Stay away from them. So we were radioing up because other companies were on the north side of all of those buildings. Like it was on the edge of the AO. Hey, let them know to stay away from these buildings. And we would still see red smoke and be like, why are they so close to that building? We know it's a bad like gig. Why? What's going on? Why is this word not getting passed up? And then when we took casualties and guys that we finally met with face to face, they're upset of like, why are you guys operating up here? Like we knew that there was bad stuff. We were passing this stuff down. Word wasn't getting passed up and down the chain because our lieutenant staffs aren't micromanaged all of it. Our lieutenant sent a patrol out without a corpsman. And we ended up losing guys on that patrol because there was no corpsman. Like it was mind blowing the decisions that our command was making, and then getting upset when we refused or fought back or hey, we're not doing this, like this is stupid, and they would get upset. But we couldn't trust. Our first sergeant evac'd himself and then wrote himself up for a Purple Heart because he hurt his back. Like that's the level of my chain of command that we had in Marja. So we can laugh about it now, right? Like I can laugh about it now, but at the time, if I knew what I knew now, I like there's no way all of those dudes I'd have been like, look, man, don't go. Like at 30 some year old me now, looking back at a bunch of 18, 19-year olds being led by those quote unquote men or quote unquote Marines, I'd be like, dude, don't do it. Don't go. It's yeah, it's a scary.
So
They were
how,
so unreliable.
and then how did you guys then, while you were there, even deal with like the emotion? And I know that like from what other Marines and service members had said, because I have not been in combat, But that you have a moment to mourn normally. It's not like the full whatever. But were you guys doing any of that? Why that like did you have any moments? Because all of these things are like I just can't even grasp mentally how devastating. And maybe it was that you just pushed everything through and had to completely push everything through until the end. But like,
I don't know if mourning would be the right word, and maybe it is, but I think most of the time it was like maybe 5, 10 minutes of like an awkward kind of silent, and then hey, we have to joke about this. Like we have to we have to make light of it because otherwise what are we gonna like we have nothing else. And so it was like the abuse of tobacco, like the amount of tobacco we'd go through in an incident like that. And there was usually an awkward like the very first casualty that our squad took, our squad leader got shot um in the head. And now he lived, he's still alive. Um, but he got shot and there was kind of a quiet, awkward, like how do we embrace each other? And like one of my best friends, MC, was the one who treated Sergeant G, and like he it was definitely harder for him because he was the one that was there, like, whoa, this is wild. Um, and it was like a few moments of chilling out and kind of like, hey man, you need a cigarette? You like, what do you need? And then it was like immediately joking about haircuts. Like, oh, Sergeant G wanted to gripe about us having haircuts. Well, I guess he got a little off the top. Like that was the running joke for us. But how else do you deal with it? We had nothing. We had no, like the company fobs, the battalion fobs, they had an MWR, right? Where they have computers and internet and phones. We were getting a satellite phone dropped off, and each of us got maybe 10 to 15 minutes a month to call home and just like get a little glimpse of like, hey, and all of us lied, right? Like you'd call your mom or some guys call wives or whatever, and it'd be like, oh yeah, we're not doing anything. It's like a vacation. We're living the dream. Shots would start snapping, and it was like, gotta go, and back to work. And so there was no mourning. I don't think happened really. Coping, maybe that's a better
coping.
word. Is
Yeah.
like coping, but it was like back to spades. Somebody had to be standing post. Somebody had to stand radio watch. That was it, it was just back to work. There was no like we never got a relief like, hey, we're gonna send 4 guys over there to stand post for you guys tonight to like chill out. And no, it was like the only person we had in our command that showed up, our gunnery sergeant showed up, and he was pulling out like half a pack of cigarettes, half a can of dip, a half a bag of chew. Like, hey, gentlemen, this is all I've got. But like, I hope this helps. And it was like, thanks, Gunny. And like, I'm gonna try to make sure you guys get some like fresh water and some, maybe I'll see if I can get a box of like steaks or something out here to you. But rare, very rare. We never really got anything where we were at.
So how was it then coming back from that deployment?
Um, I tried to stay. Um, I think mentally, and I'm glad that they forced me to come home. Honestly, like mental health wise, I would have been one of those dudes that just stayed in Vietnam forever and never came back, like and just been tapped. But we had a vendetta. Like October, Sergeant G had gotten shot, and this is just my squad. I'm not. There was other squads were taking casualties by all means, but like October, Sergeant G gets shot. December, and this is kind of on our squad leader making poor decisions. We had 2 guys get blown up by an IED, including the squad leader. And then January, me and another guy get blown up. And so it was like we took 4 casualties in 9 days in 2 explosions. And within 8 days, I was like, I'm going back. I'm back to patrolling. Let's go. We we pushed. Like I personally, I felt like I had a vendetta, and I was already mentally like checked into this is where I'm at. I didn't want to come home. I asked to cross deck. I requested paperwork to stay with 2-8. Like I don't want to go home. I just want to stay here. I don't. Part of it was I didn't think I could face my family because I had lied to them. I wasn't even going to tell my mom I got blown up, but they sat me down in a little room with a phone and were like, you have to call her and tell her before anybody else is allowed to do anything, because otherwise we have to call her and then she'll freak out. Like, you are coherent, call her and tell her. Called her, told her, she didn't believe me. I was like, okay, right on. And then it took her a couple days. But I was like, I lied to my sisters. I lied to all these people. Everybody thinks that this deployment's nothing. And I was checked in, so I didn't want to come home. And when
Yeah.
we got home, I was very angry. I wanted space. I didn't want to be, all I wanted was to drink, um, really like drink and be alone. That was it. Like, we got back in the middle of the night on Valentine's Day. We went back to the hotel room. Everybody went to bed, and I sat in the bathroom with a case of beer with like the hot shower running, and just sat in the shower with it running in the bathtub and just drank a case of beer. This is the first night back. Like,
Yeah.
that was, I don't know. How do you talk to your family? How do you talk to anybody about it? Like, how do you, and they have no idea. To them, I left at 19. So they're expecting like the the 19-year-old me that left. And granted, there's a change like after boot camp and infantry school and even being in the fleet for a little bit. But then when we came home from that deployment, everybody was, and like people talk about like, oh, they're the change. I didn't think it had changed because it was gradual for us, but for them, they didn't see us. And then when I come home and I'm like, dude, I just want to chill. Like, yeah, but we haven't seen you in 8 months or 9 months or whatever it was. And it was like, yeah, but I haven't seen you either. Leave me alone. Like, I don't want a hug. I don't want just, I just want to be left alone. So it was hard. It was definitely challenging.
And I wonder if like how your command was had a lot of impact on that too. Like you know, like, okay, we were supposed to rely on these people and not like they're like your mother, your fathers, but right, they're supposed to be kind of like that while on deployment, especially. And then the fact that they never did any of the things that they should have. Um, and
Yeah.
like there are so many, I think, levels that you explained it very well. So how did you start getting through it? Or what were those like times like after the initial like I'm back?
Uh,
How did it start to evolve from there?
so we get back and we got back Valentine's Day 2011. And then they kept us on base until March 1st. March 1st, we went on post deployment. And I went straight to the hospital in DC, um, Bethesda.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's where he was. What was the one they shut down? They shut one of them down, and that was where he was at. But anyway, I went straight to Bethesda to see my buddy who lost his leg in December. And he had just had a baby as well. Like, he lost his leg in December, had a baby in January, and so I went straight to the hospital. Didn't I knew him a little before we deployed. He was one of the guys that now we were in the same squad, and so we became extremely close. Um, and so I went straight to the hospital, and I spent, I think, 2 or 3 days of my post deployment at the hospital with him and his wife and his newborn. And I just hung out with them. And that was, I probably, the best thing for me, because I was still like in the environment without being in the environment. And it was definitely hard for me because the patrol that he lost his leg on. So I was like our squad's point man almost all deployment. Um, and that day I was really sick. And usually MC would be like the next dude, and he wasn't feeling hot. And so it was like MC would go on post, Mandy sit on the radio, Stevie will take point. No big deal. And it was like, I hated that because look, I've been point man this whole deployment. I hate giving it up, but I'm super sick. Yeah, no big deal. And then he gets blown up and loses his leg. And so when I see him in the hospital missing his leg, it's like, dude, that should be me. And I don't have a kid. I'm not married. Me losing a leg's way different than you losing a leg and you. And so that was super hard for me to just kind of like deal with. I should be in that position and it shouldn't be him, not this dude who's now a dad and married. And so I struggled with that probably way longer than I'll ever admit or think about or think that I've struggled with it.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went home, and when I got home to Pennsylvania, it was immediate just drinking, partying, um, mostly almost for 30 straight days or 27 days. And I had a Jeep Wrangler, needed a new suspension. I spent probably 20 to 25 days swapping out my suspension on my Jeep with a guy from my platoon. Like that's how mentally, like, he was in a different squad, but we were from the same area, so we were tight. He came to my house almost every single day, and he'd get to my house, let's say at noon. We'd start working on my Jeep, start drinking, and by about 3 or 4, it's like, well, we're too drunk to get anything else done. Oh, I guess we'll just sit and drink the rest of the day. And so we did that for the entire month of March. Barely spent time with our families, barely did anything else, and we would just reminisce, talk about being in Afghanistan. Like, while we're working on our Jeep, let's just talk about Afghanistan. And it was hard for my family, I know, definitely probably hard for his, but drinking that was all we knew, right? Like, what else does the Marine Corps give you?
And I'm
The string.
assuming from how you've explained your command, nobody was checking up on you guys either. Like,
Absolutely not.
I mean, don't
No,
want to make
I
an
didn't even know
assumption,
that was a
but
thing. I didn't know that was even like, I didn't know command did that. Everybody went their separate ways. We got drunk. We come back from post deployment, and we get back April 1st. April, May, June, we didn't, as long as you showed up in the morning and you showed up in the evening. I mean, there were times when we were showing up to afternoon formation already wrecked. I mean, it'd be like lunchtime. We'd be like, let's go to the PX, get a bottle of vodka, come back. And by like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that was it. We were tanked. I mean, yeah, that was all we knew. It was like play Xbox and drink. That was what we did day in and day out.
and was that how like your and like the rest of your enlistment essentially went, or was there a point in the enlistment before the transition that things started like changing?
Um, Most of it, I would say, yeah, it was a lot of Xbox and drinking. I mean, I from my point, that's like what infantry guys. It's like if you're not in the field, we're back chilling, playing Xbox and drinking. Um, and I got moved, right? We get back, I get moved to a totally different platoon. Like me and 2 or 3 other guys from my platoon get moved to a new platoon. We're just dropped in. They're like, hey, we're going to put you guys in leadership billets. We're going to mix everybody up, put you in leadership billets. So I was slotted to go to corporal's course, squad unit leaders course. Like, I was slotted to do these things. And then we got a boot drop. They got promoted to Lance Corporal on July 1st. We pinned them. I mean, I'm assuming you know what a pinning is. We pinned them, come back from July 4th, 96, and we're getting investigated for hazing because we pinned these Marines. So 2 guys end up going to the brig and getting court-martialed, and 12 of us got NJP'd. So loss of rank, loss of pay. And so I went from, and not just me, a ton of other guys all are in these positions of like getting promoted, going to these great courses, to now I'm an A gunner. Now I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. And
And
all this experience I have, all of this training I have, I was slotted to go to DMOC, which is a live tissue medical class, which is like the best training on the planet. Slotted to go to that, which would save Marines' lives. They pulled me from it simply because of this whole incident, and then didn't send anybody in my place. So it was like, now we're not going to have somebody with this training. So what happens when we do, like, all because of this, we're going to now put the rest
and
of everybody else at risk?
and again, and I think it goes back, it's not like you guys had leadership. Like, and
No.
I'm not saying like hazing is like right. Like I think that like
I am. That's what makes Marines hard.
I personally don't agree with that. I was in the Marine Corps watching the transition that there's other forms of hazing that are not that, right? Or there's forms of leadership, but it
Yeah.
sounds like you guys weren't getting any leadership at all. And so it's hard, I think, to then listen to it and be like, not that uh, accountability is awesome and should happen, but like it's hard when the accountability is only happening to the the lowest ranking and the people that realistically didn't have all this leadership and mentorship that they
Yeah.
should have had, because yet again here you are, 19, 20 year olds, 18 year olds who have just experienced these absolutely like,
Yeah.
you know, just experiences that nobody around them can relate to, and then yet you it's wild, and I
Yeah.
think it's like a way deeper discussion that we could like have on that. And like,
None of,
how was then your, so you deployed again, kind
yep.
of the rest of your experience, how was it then, and kind of what was your reasoning for transitioning out of the Marine Corps?
Well, second deployment, we didn't do, it was not like my first deployment.
Okay.
We were still in Marja, but climate was a bit different. We weren't getting shot at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We weren't taking casualties. It was a much chiller deployment, working out, eating. Like we were still at patrol bases, but it was way different. Um, and then we come home. It's like I could probably start my transition out, um, but I fought tooth and nail to go on one more deployment, um, just because that was the environment I thrived in. I thrived in being overseas. In I don't know, there was something about it that it was like I'm good at this. Like I'm good at this job. I am. I had gotten combat meritoriously promoted Lance Corporal on my second deployment, and then was like still moving up. And our new first sergeant really respected me. He was the type of dude that actually did check in on his Marines. Um, Great, solid first sergeant. He went to weapons company. And so I was like, I want to go to weapons company. I want to deploy with weapons company. And so deployed, um, got team leader of the quarter that deployment, come home, get meritorious corporal after that deployment. And right before that deployment, I took a girl to the Marine Corps ball, and 9 months later, we had a little girl. And so that was what really like got me. I probably would have stayed in the Marine Corps. But on my third deployment, we got smashed in Tisney Bazaar. I mean, they were just, it was like all hell was raining down on us. And there was a brief second where I thought to myself, man, I'm never going to get to meet my little girl. And I had just found out 3 or 4 days prior to that that she was pregnant with a girl. Like, I didn't know this girl. It was a, hey, do you want to go to the Marine Corps ball with me? Because everybody knows what the Marine Corps ball is good for, right? So, uh, yeah, I'll take her to the Marine Corps birthday ball. Never thought I'd speak to her again. I'm going back to Afghanistan. I'm never going to, like, what do I have to worry about? And that was in obviously November. December, I get the text of like, hey, pretty sure I'm pregnant. I am on pre-deployment, getting ready to go back, and it's like, yep, I'm definitely pregnant. Um, Hear the heartbeat, all that good stuff. So then now this whole deployment, it's a girl that I really don't know is pregnant with my kid. So the very first time that I'm in a tick and I hesitated for a second, thinking, man, what if I never get to meet my kid? That was what really helped me like shift gears of like, maybe I need to, because it could have cost somebody their life. Maybe I need to consider getting out. So get out of the Marine Corps, uh, party a little bit, and then move to Indiana. Didn't
Which you're
even know
not
where Indiana.
from. I was gonna say,
No,
which you are not from.
don't. Didn't know where it was on a map. It was like put the address into Google, and there I am, my little Jeep Wrangler, packed with what I could fit, and I'm just driving in the middle of June, so it's hot in a 95 Jeep Wrangler, which is even hotter. Most of the roads are like 70 miles an hour. I can only go like 60. Like this is going to be rough. And I arrive in Indiana at like, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night with people I really don't know in an area I really don't know. But in my head, it was like, this is what life is. Look at my experience in the Marine Corps. There was so many unknowns and so many like, you just got to roll with it that well, this is just what life is for everybody. So make the best of it. And so started looking for jobs, started trying to like meet some people. I worked out with her brothers at the gym. And so that kind of helped. I still was drinking, um, got jobs. I was working two jobs at one point, just like it was like working two jobs plus working out at the gym. And it was like as little time as possible that I need, like, I had to absorb all my time because I couldn't be around anybody. And of course, like I have this person I don't know. My daughter's born in August, and that was probably the best thing for me was to have my daughter. Because before my daughter, I would always visit my buddy who lost his leg and visit her. And like holding, there was something peaceful about like this this baby knows nothing about what we've like isn't tarnished by the world yet. Like there's something about it. And so now I have my own, but again, I'm still in a place where I don't really know people. I don't have anybody around me. Um, I ended up going to I buy a house, right? Like, what does anybody do? They just buy a house. I'm stuck here, so buy a house. Um, and then went to the American Legion because where else am I going to find veterans that want to drink? Made some good friends. It didn't help that everybody was still like embracing the alcohol.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I met a Marine in college. I decided to go to college after me and my daughter's mom split. I decided to go to college. One, burn up the GI Bill, and two, it was like, I'm not going to find wife material at the bar. Maybe I'll find wife material at school. Like that was my mentality. Not that I wanted an education. Uh,
Go find a
go
wife.
to college. Uh, I meet another Marine, and he comes to me and is like, "Are you doing all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "I've had too many friends commit suicide." Now he was like a generation before me. He was like Iraq days, early Afghanistan days, and so I'm like, "Yeah, man." And that was the first time I think I had seen the veteran community be like what everybody talks about. Like, well, this is what my command should have been doing.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a guy. This is the first night of public speaking, and you're gonna wait for me in the hallway and tell like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And we ended up becoming great friends, business partners, um, and we both had our ups and downs of like times of the year and what went on. But he was the one that really kind of got me started away from drinking because he lifted weights like nobody I'd ever seen. And it was like my maxes are his warm-ups. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? And he's like, oh man, this is how I deal with everything. It's like I just throw. And so it was like, yeah, I don't drink anymore. Because I asked him, let's go get a beer. Like, I don't drink anymore. I got kids, I work out, I want to be clear-headed all the time. And it was like, oh yeah, okay. I still drank, but not when I was involved with stuff with him.
Yeah.
So that helped me quit drinking. I ended up taking over the Marine Corps League detachment in our area, and I thought that would help. That made me drink more because all the events, all the old guys are drinking, everybody's drinking, they're buying you drinks. Um, and like I probably had alcohol poisoning more times than I would like to admit. I mean, there's time, yeah, it was bad. Uh, and then I became friends with a Marine. Long story short, when we met, I laughed at him. He had gotten out of the Marine Corps and became a pastor. Laughed at him nonstop. Was like, dude, this is a hilarious joke. Like, there's no way a church would ever take a Marine and then allow them to speak to a congregation. Like, that's unheard of. That's like, I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible somewhere. That can't be a thing. Like, a commandment was like, no, Marines can't do this. We ended up becoming best friends. And he helped. I'm a single dad in a state, you know, 800, 900 miles away from any family. I had a few friends, but it was difficult for me to rely on them or ask them like, hey, can you watch my daughter so I can do this or whatever? Because I'm not being raised as a male, for one, like you don't ask for help, you just deal with it. And two, it's like you've only known these people for a
Yeah.
short time. Like, how much do you really want to? But Bobby, um, he him and his wife just like took me and my daughter in as like family. It was just different. And so then I still dealt with a lot, and I think he helped me work through a bunch. But then it wasn't until I really like, I guess, dove in to like having a relationship with Christ to where that allowed my mind to then be like, hey, you're not as broken and you don't have to like muscle through all of this. And that was where it started. Obviously, it's still like there's still stuff that comes up, and I have to like remember that, like, hey, alcohol isn't the solution to deal with these things. And like, it's just stuff I have to let go of. And like, memories pop up or whatever, but it's just, yeah, I think that was the biggest level of peace of like, hey, I'm not completely alone all of the time. I don't have to do this on my own. That's like, I'm blessed to have a creator that loves me and, you know, put me here for a reason. And so it's easier for me to deal with and look back on all those things and go, yes, it sucked. You embraced it, but all of those things happen for a very particular reason. And of course, now like I'm married and have more kids. I would have never met my wife if I would have never come to Indiana. I wouldn't have my wonderful boys if I wouldn't have come, like if I wouldn't have made the choices that I did. And like I hurt people along the way, and I hate that. Um, like the people that I crushed because of like my selfishness and the destruction that I was on. And unfortunately, like part of that was all part of the plan to get me here to where now I'm sitting here with you and we're having this conversation. Because if I wanted to come to Indiana, who knows, wrap around a tree or something, you know? So
And
yeah.
I just, the beauty of, and I just have to say this because I hope like one day, your daughter listens to this and your children's listen to this and they hear your story, like years down the
Yeah.
line, especially like as they can process it more. And just like that choice of going to a place where you know nobody to make sure that you can be a father and be in your daughter's life, like chills. And I feel like so many of us in the military, we make those decisions at some point to like, whether it's to go back home to be around
Yeah.
families or go places to be where our children are, or like we have these non-traditional families that we have to like adjust to be able to be a part of everybody's life. I just think that it is absolutely like beautiful that like that choice, right, then leads you to like to be able to be in this point in your life. And it's not that like you said, it's not like you're completely broken. It's not like all these things are fixed. It's so much more than that. And I think that it is absolutely beautiful. And we're almost out of time, and I don't know where the hour went, like by any means, but I can't thank you enough for like sharing your story. But before I ask the last question, I want to make sure if there's anything else you want to talk about, because I think we talked about it a lot, but like the not drinking and the impact of that and just those things, I think there is so much wisdom that you have shared in your experience. So I want to give you the opportunity if there's anything we haven't talked about that we talk about.
I think a lot of it just came from like what we talked about earlier of like when we were with our squad out at our OP, there was zero room for selfishness. Like it was, oh, I was like, there were nights where like, and not just me, there were other guys who would choose to just like stand fire watch or stand post all night so that the other guys could get a couple more hours of sleep. Or like it would like there was just no room for selfishness. Like I don't matter, we matter. And so like some people have a hard time, like, I guess, man, you just like packed up and moved to somewhere else. And it's like, dude, I didn't feel like I had a choice. I didn't feel like that was even, I don't know. Like to me, it was just, oh, this is the next phase of life for me. This is the next place to go. And I think it comes back to, and again, everything happens for such a particular reason, and all the bad things are always used for good. I had a terrible command, and our command wasn't there for us. And even my dad left when I was like 16. And so I didn't have a father after 16, which most would say, like, oh, well, you had him the other 16 years. He was there physically, but, was he there? And so, which don't now me and him have a great relationship. It is a phenomenal relationship now, totally restored. Again, all glory to God that it even came full circle. But a lot of that was I have to be there for my kid. Part of it was pride too, I think, of like, well, I don't want anybody saying I didn't raise my kid. But then I come here. I went to school for business. Actually, I went to school to become a medic. Was still drinking, was still angry. Dropped the medic program because I kept getting in fights with the instructor because we do things way differently medically in combat than they want to do because it hadn't evolved yet. But anyway, I went to school to that for that, dropped that, went to school for business. I ended up teaching high school for a year at an alternative school. And like most people are like, you, if they knew me from the Marine Corps, they're like, you were a teacher? You were in any position of like mentoring kids? How? Um, and again, like most of I had 10 students. Most of my students still come to me and like I talk to some of them on a regular basis, but they'll still come to me and like talk to me about things or share accomplishments with me or like, hey, I'm glad you were so hard on me.
But I unfortunately I'm going to have to ask the last question of the
Yeah.
podcast, which is if you had to take the oath again, would you?
Uh part of me, yes. Because it led me to where I am, right? Like it built me, molded me. Um, but wow. Um, I don't know. That's is the guys I met, the experiences I have, the things I did. Yes, I loved it. I had a blast. The administration sucked. Like there were times where they were doing sit-ins and not paying government employees, and we're like, "Oh, cool, we're not going to get paid." Like we're over here war fighting and we're not going to get paid. So it sucked. Like I just dealing with government and politics, like that all sucked. Um, would I do it for the guys and for where I am? Sure. Would I talk somebody into it? Probably not. Like, probably not. They don't do anything for you. I mean, you fight for the with the VA for hours and days and weeks just to get them to like see you. And then it's like, oh, well, I'll just send you some pain pills. And it's like, I don't want pain pills. I want fixed. I want helped. Like, uh, so it's hard. My transition out of the Marine Corps, I got home from Afghanistan in May and separated in June. There was no decompression. There was no um, good separation. It was like, do you have a plan? And it was like, yeah, I'm going to go work for the pipeline. I've never worked for a pipeline in my life. I never even applied. Like I told them something and then I figured it out. And yeah, working. Yeah, I don't know. That is a really thought provoking to get me where I am now. Yes. Knowing what I know now,